Welcome to the Black Writer Studio, a podcast presented by the Hurston Wright Foundation and hosted by Dr. Khadijah Ali-Coleman. The Black Writer Studio is dedicated to showcasing Black writers who are transforming the world today with their literary pen and creating a legacy for the culture. Dr. DaMaris B. Hill is the author of Breath Better Spent, Living Black Girlhood, A Bound Woman is a Dangerous Thing, The Incarceration of African American Women from Harriet Tubman to Sandra Bland, The Fluid Boundaries of Suffrage and Jim Crow, Staking Claims in the American Heartland, and Visible Textures. She is a 2020 NAACP Image Award nominee for Outstanding Literary Work in Poetry and was a Hurston Wright College Award winner in 2003. Similar to her creative process, Dr. Hill's scholarly research is interdisciplinary. Dr. Hill is an associate professor of creative writing at the University of Kentucky. So you look so beautiful today, and it's so great to have you here, Dr. DaMaris Hill.
Thank you, Khadijah, and thank you for the invite. I'm so happy.
Yes, we couldn't begin a podcast, the Black Writer Studio, without having someone who has such a long history with the Hurston Wright Foundation and whose work is so significant. You know, as a Black writer, you are significant to us, but also the types of things that you write about. And so I have so many questions around, you know, past work that you've done, you know, of course, wanting to dig into this profile that you recently did for Baltimore Magazine on our beloved Zora Neale Hurston. But I actually want you to open us up with talking about something that you have on the horizon that's coming very soon and letting us know a little bit about some new work that we can expect from you.
Okay, well, January 25th, I will be releasing Breath Better Spent, Living Black Girlhood. And as you can see, it has certain type of sequin on it.
Oh, wow.
And we're capturing the light and magic and multiple luminicities of Black girlhood.
Yes, I see all the hues. It looks like it has the different hues.
Lots of hues too.
I love that. And so when this episode actually launches, it'll be February, and so this will be on sale for folks to purchase. Correct?
Yes, it will. It's available in ebook and hardback. Right now, it's cheap. It's available at its cheapest on the Bloomsbury website.
Okay.
But it's also available at your indie bookstore or your local bookstore. It should be available. And also Amazon and major retailers.
Oh, I love it. I love opening up with the details. So we definitely will have that information available for folks who are viewing this and they want to purchase this. But tell us a little bit about it. What was the catalyst for this new project of yours? You're coming off of, you know, you've done everything from creative, from poetry, from creative fiction. You've done everything, talking about from the suffragist movements and Jim Crow. You have such a multitude of interests, of expertise. What led to this, and what is it about?
Okay, so what led to this is when the pandemic first started. I'm well read, and I talk about often Black womanhood, you know, from pre-colonial period to the futures, right? To 21st century and the futures. But when this pandemic first started, I wanted to really rethink what a Black woman's canon looks like. And so I delved deeply into works that I hadn't read deeply when I first became interested in being a writer.
Wow.
So
And that's so much to unpack right there, because then the question is,
Yes.
why? Was this because of what was introduced to you through your
I
studies?
just don't think I was mature enough. So let's be clear.
Okay.
Even though portions of this book on Black girlhood, in terms of essays, were written before, and the thoughts have been with me a long time, I was not mature enough for this book. This book grew me.
Wow. That's some vulnerability right there. And you know, at what point do you admit that to yourself? Is that something you always knew, or was there like this coming of age even now that you had to go through?
Of course.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was always with me, but I do know other stuff was in a way.
Like what?
Certain baggage I had, whether it be rage, performativity, a reactional relationship with societal pressures and patriarchy, a respectability performance. All of those things may have been in the way. I mean, I was very much born and grew up in the church. Like, let's be clear, I am the person in my family without an MDiv. I'm the one going to heaven, but I'm taking the scenic route and not the express route. My childhood best friend, Reverend Erica Crawford, runs a very large church in Dover, Delaware.
Okay.
My uncle used to run a seminary at Wilberforce. My dad and my uncle met at Wilberforce, where he also met my mother.
Wow. And then when we talk about tradition, you also have a tradition of being a history of being a service member as well, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. A history of, I am AME, so a history of ethical and moral based religious servitude. So I'm not always here for the dogma, but I'm here for the results.
So how did that manifest for you? So, I mean, because what you're saying is a lot. And a lot of times, you know, when we even look at the national conversations around religion, very rarely is there space for folks to even have that conversation where I'm here for the results, for the outcomes. You know, it's in the practice of it is individual or whatever it is.
Absolutely.
You know? So
the practice of it is very individual. I think of and this, you know, this might be something that I really need to write about, and I've been thinking about writing about for a long time. But dogma is like the training wheels. It'll get you on a bike, right? But at some point, you have to learn to drive that bike and imagine what kind of journey you can go on. And that may exceed the dogma and the culture of church. So that's what I'm saying. But also one of the greatest benefits, you know, because I'm not to sound too critical of church, is I was exposed to metaphor and literary interpretation.
Right.
From the very beginning.
Right. So let's dig into this book now. So as we're talking about this as this coming to age, really, this ability, this book provided space for you to kind of remove all of these things that have been blockades for you to really be authentic. That's what I'm hearing, as authentic as possible. So is there a piece in there that really speaks to this becoming of?
So when I was reading some of these classics that may include I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, Their Eyes Are Watching God, Dust Tracks on the Road, when I was reading Their Eyes Are Watching God, it's a point when Janie is burying her second husband. And right after he dies, she runs up to the mirror. And this is the line that that continuously inspired this book. Years ago, she had told her girl self to wait for her in the looking glass. Wow. Perhaps it was time she remembered. And so
I got goosebumps.
right, because we don't talk about Zora
right
in a way where her life was a journey.
Right.
We talk about Zora and Harriet Tubman and other Black women that we revere, standing in their power, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's time we look at the journeys to which they take to arrive to that power. Because I think that understanding that it is a journey, particularly in this cultural time period where everything is so instant,
right,
that can be helpful to individuals that we love in a culture.
Right. And it's so interesting that you even characterize it like that, because when we even think about Zora, for those of us who know the history around how she really became a part of our current consciousness through Alex Walker, looking for her and finding her gravesite. But even the narrative that we place on her, you know, that she died poor, and we make these assumptions that her life was not fulfilled because we equate success with these material things or these certain types of outcomes as you speak of. But for all we know, you know, her life, she could have perceived her life as, you say, this journey that she set out to do, everything that she said she would do.
And we also don't talk about the obstacles. In A Bound Woman, I talk about how she was accepted to 2 PhD programs, but nobody would fund her. Yeah. So she did the Black woman's work, right, of challenging academically and research-wise eugenics, medical racism, and patriarchy that talked about the white male being the most evolved of creatures, right? Right. She did all that hard work to debunk that, clearly did enough work that she is still impacting the literary community and the anthropological community, was accepted to 2 PhD programs, and capitalism wins again. Nobody will pay for it.
Exactly. Even when we think of Barracoon, just coming out, you know, like decades after her passing, and this issue of funding, you're exactly right. So I would love to hear how that passage that you read from her work, and you say it influenced this book. Is there a piece that's firmly tied to, or was the first piece that you wrote for the book as you began to gather your pieces? I recall actually watching an interview with you where someone asked about your writing process. And I think you responded with you throw it at the wall, right? But then, which sounds so spontaneous and possibly chaotic, but then you followed up with, you have this really you are very meticulous with your editing and with the things, you know, your choices as to what winds up making the final cut. So I would love to know what made that final cut, you know, with this writing process of yours.
So there are so many ways I can answer that, but another inspiration for the book, let me be clear, was an exhibit I saw at the Visionary Museum, the Black Girlhood Museum in Philadelphia. They had an exhibit called In Search Of, that was talking about Black women that were missing from American culture. So I was thinking about that. I was thinking about all the safety institutional spaces that allow me to access Black girlhood, like Black Girl Genius Week with Ruth Nicole Brown and Shamara Kwachi, and the Urban Bushwomen Summer Leadership Institute.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And like just being, because, and I don't mean to skip around, but just being in these institutional spaces. But this is the thing. If you want to understand the intellectual dexterity and the magnitude of what we have come to embrace as Black girl genius and Black girl magic, you cannot learn it in one space.
Right.
because the obstacles that Zora experienced, all of us experience those at different degrees. Yeah. There are gatekeepers that are invested in narratives that are reductive to Black women's intellectual strategy, dexterity, and survival.
Right.
Not all, but just some.
Right.
And enough of those sums take up enough space that it can make it difficult for multiple voices that affirm Black girls to be available.
Right.
And so, particularly in institutional spaces, higher educational spaces, it is important to seek out these institutions like the Hurston Wright Foundation, founded by a Black woman.
Mm-hmm. Right? Yes, indeed. Marita Golden, that's right.
Marita Golden, who is a treasure.
Yes.
Among treasures.
Yes.
And to watch her process of building an institution and how to sustain an institution that is invested in anti-patriarchal practices.
Right.
You know how hard it is to work in capitalism and get money and be anti-patriarchal?
Right.
All of these women that are doing it, her, Joale Zola, Ruth Nicole Brown, the Black Girl Museum, Vashti Dubois.
Right.
All of these women.
And look, and then going to start an organization and then found it and then, bring other people in like myself to work at it and then continuing to do the work as an independent author, but also teaching other people how to hone their craft and be successful. So it just, there's no limit to the things that she has done for our community. But the fact is that she is one example of just a very few who are pushing back against what you are characterizing as this gatekeeper culture, but that tends to keep us separated. Where we're not able to share this part of the narrative. I always think of Toni Morrison when she talks about, racism, keeps you off and this is not what she said, but me paraphrasing is it keeps you away from doing the work, right?
Keeps you from doing the work.
Yeah.
It's exactly that. And like, while I'm thinking about that, I want to be clear to think about like also Peoria's Flower Poetry Center and all the work that that's that church girl coming out of me, but I'm gonna say that Blessed Elizabeth Alexander is doing right now.
Oh wow.
With the Mellon Foundation.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I mean, what else can I say? Like, love and light at work, right?
How beautifully put.
And I admire these women, most of whom are creative scholars. Deb Willis, also doing it with the Center for Black Photography, right? Creative scholars who can make beautiful art, but says these institutions are also important. And I am magnificent as Zora is magnificent, as Maya was magnificent, and I will do both.
It's I feel like you're giving literary libation right now to those who walk among us, those who have come before us. And it sounds like in a way that this forthcoming book is really an opportunity for you to give libation to those who have come before, who are among us, but also to your own growing and becoming self. Is there, if you had to, as a writer, is there a way that you kind of gauge when you've really developed a new skill or a new way of being as a writer that has really emerged or progressed or evolved from where you were before?
this is always so hard for me. And I want to talk about the influence of one of my mentors, Monifa Love Asante, on my life.
Oh, wow.
The first time, so much like a singer, my literary voice, and this may be true for other literary voices, they change. Mm-hmm. And with this book particularly, my literary voice changed so much. When I was editing this book, I was terrified of the voice in this book. Terrified.
What were you scared of?
I had never heard it before. Mm. I didn't know how to contextualize it. I was afraid it was coming from me. Like, who is that? Who is that? Because I did not envision that voice. I didn't know that I could sound like that in a page. And it's so different from what I had sounded like before. And this is probably my third or fourth time where my voice has changed. But if Monifa Love Asante did not tell me that it was going to continue to happen, the first time it happened, I thought I lost my ability to write. I was like, what's going on? Because like any transition, it appears to be chaos. Mm-hmm. Any transition, any journey, when you are in the middle, it appears to be chaos. It appears that all is lost. And there is no way to begin again, and there is no way to end. But that is when you are smack in the middle.
Yes.
And then, yeah, and that's just when your intuition and your faith, you know, and your inner spirit has to lead you. But it's in those moments in my life that I trust my Black girlhood, because that child ain't never lied to me. She has protected me from her inception. And when I am in those spaces of confusion, I ask her advice. Now I know she's a little angry sometimes. She got a little rage with her sometimes. So I gotta be like, all right. But I like that though, right?
Right.
Or wait for my friends to check me, because I know she's a little peculiar. You know what I'm saying? She's a little different, right? She's a multi-sensory little girl that don't understand why culture is so separated from reality. Like, she don't understand it.
Right.
So, but that's my friend. And she got my back.
Did she show up in every piece for the book?
Oh my God, she does. Oh my God. So I'm gonna read this one piece. And I think what she's doing is she's showing up. And I mean, I guess she's twirling around in a dress or dance or something. She doing what she do, you know. Beloved weirdo, you are not digging this book about a slave girl and her incidents. These pages read about her early knowing of all things. Meanwhile, you ain't got a stitch of sense. If you did, you would have put that book down and hit that boy asking you if your name is beloved, and if you gonna be like Setha and kill the newborn baby he wants to put in you. Is he the weirdo watching in on you and your bestie leaving the woman's clinic? You wish you would have gone wild as the wind on him for prying. Instead, you go deaf and dumb thinking on it. Your mind wanders into a book. You think on asking Miss Harriet Jacobs, how does a girl learn to be a slave? Does a snake bite you and leak venom until you fall crippled and spasm, zombie you into a slave? If no, then you got to swallow a butterfly and let it flutter in your throat. Smother your words until you become a slave. Do you let the butterfly kick you way up into your tonsils? This might make your eyes rummage the floor for cracks and force you to be humble. Can a slave be made from a butterfly that avoids windows, avoids light? Does that butterfly become a bat under a girl's collar Or do you crawl under the hoof of a horse named Andrew Jackson to be a slave? The horse galloping and neighing at your earlobes, dirt in with the blood. To be a slave, you would have to take your ribs and fashion Andrew Jackson's hooves with ivory shoes. Would the overseers use your teeth to tether and hold Andrew Jackson's shoes in like nails in the cradle of your black ringing neck? Do you offer the nag a pedestal and curtsy at the mare's master? Just curious, not dying to know. And I think that's what the book is about. The book is a kind of origin story about me seeing myself in literature. It's a book about holding on to a spirit of liberation, even when age, class, gender, nationality, sex, sexuality, even in some of the poems, are pervading you with norms that are non-reflective of who you are.
Wow. It's interesting because in a way it's kind of an unveiling. You've always given the impression of this authentic self that was very bearing, even though you did tend to focus in a lot of your work on other women. This is the first time really it seems that you're focused on yourself, but even in that reading, there's so much imagery around the voice speaking up and letting free this energy that has been really restrained. And I think that in a way that's so revealing and it's unveiling of what has been, happening behind the scenes, where folks probably wouldn't even have thought that this was something you were going through. Have you, before this went to press, did you feel that you had to have any, or did you have any conversations with family members or anyone who would read this and learn something new about you that they didn't already know about you?
I did not. So since I was again, talking about growing up in the church, I made a decision very early that respectability was not for me, but I did not know that that's what I was choosing. What I knew is that if I lived up to everybody's expectations, I would be dead very quickly. My father was somewhat a public figure. My mother, in relationship to my father, was a public figure. But to be clear, my mother's family is comprised of a number of public figures in their own regional space. There was always a hyper sense of visibility that surrounded respectability and all kinds of things that come with that, like the politics of physical appearance, what femininity looks like, what is the expectation of femininity. And all of that stuff seemed to not really serve me, right? Because it just became, imagine if you were on a carousel of cultural instruction and pruning and cultivation, right? Which is most of what it can be for a girl from birth. It is an indoctrination, at least in patriarchal cultures, on how to survive a masculinity that may be vicious, right? And then how to get as much as you can because you don't have access to cultural standards of masculinity because you don't have a penis.
Right. But then you just said pruning. which was so significant, because that then means this cutting away, or this something that you have to shed or have taken from you in order to be socialized into this the society. Wow.
And not everybody was invested in that. I would say oftentimes my father was not invested in all of that. He was a little bit more liberatory with me, but like, be clear, my mother went to a boarding school in England.
Oh, wow.
So, and she was a feminist in her own definition. When I was working on this book last year for at least 5 months, I got up from 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. and wrote this book.
Wait a minute. What? Say that again. I don't think I heard you.
Yeah. So I've been trying to get up at 4. It's 2 other people in my life that get up at 4. Monique Lovasanti and Nikki Finney been telling me about 4 a.m. for like 15 years. And I'm like, and so 6 a.m. is easy for me because I'm a military person. 5 a.m. became easier for me. As of the pandemic, 4 a.m. was it. And I did find a reverence for it. As Nikki said, like I would.
Right.
Nikki was like, this is how you do it.
Right.
And you're just going to be in it.
Right, right.
And once, I decided that writing comes first. Even if I take a nap in the afternoon, even if I got to go to bed at 8:30 at night, 4 a.m. to 8, I belong to the work.
Oh, wow.
So I give the first 2 hours to reading. And it's usually prescriptive. I try to figure out what I want to edit or what I want to compose that day. A lot of what I read again when I was writing this book was Toni K. Bambara, Maya Angelou, and Zora Neale Hurston. Of course, I'm always going through some different Toni Morrisons at all times. And different poets like Patricia Smith. I should have been named Jimmy Savannah. What? That book is crazy. Like that book is crazy. Crazy.
So when you even say prescriptive, you're reading these pieces, are they kind of like your hype women that are
definitely. So I'm all hip hop. They definitely my hype women. Like I'm thinking about them. I'm like, hey, I'm trying to get in this cipher. I'm trying to be in this cipher. Right. Let me see what bars I got. Let me see what bars I got for this cipher. Like it's definitely that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah.
This is very few people speak about, because you hear all the time, to be a great writer you have to be a great reader, but I really haven't heard anyone talk about including that in their writing process, and that kind of being this way, because it sounds like it's like your meditation in a sense, your church before you dig in.
It definitely is my church, but again, because of the people that came before me, I have the privilege of even living my life as a writer. I do not want to disappoint them.
That's right.
Or the little girl that got me here to this point.
Right, right.
So it was not easy to be authentic in this book. Like I feel like in everything, every poem, let's be clear, is not a documentary sketch of my life.
Right.
There are, but there's a kernel of my life, I think, in each poem. And there are some places where I exaggerated for the literary motif. And there are some places where things are left out to go down just one particular road, right? Or take one particular journey on the page. But like, maybe that's the difference in the voice, because I had to relive and revisit that person that looked at the culture that had embraced me, blessed me, and nurtured me, like the church culture, right? Was responsible for everything that I had and say, this may not be right. This may not be me. That person showed up for me again. It made me interrogate. And the pandemic was the perfect time to do it, because as we were grieving so many people who lost their life, it was important to take stock on what was important to you and why. So it was the perfect time to inventory Black girlhood and to stop talking about Black girlhood as a particular time in my youth and talk about how she's with me now.
Wow, yeah. So how she's a value, you know, when we talk about the archetype, she's forever living. I love that.
She's on my shoulders. Like, forget this head.
Right.
Look at the girl on my shoulder.
Right. Did you start writing this at the very start of the pandemic, in 2020 or last year?
I started writing other persona poems again, because we also, you know, we're in the twin pandemics of racial injustice,
yes,
and of COVID-19. But even prior to our conversations that were formally happening about Black Lives Matter and racial injustice, Black women were being erased and disappeared,
yes,
and victimized without documentation.
Yeah.
So I was thinking a lot about that. And I'm still continuing to think about what does patriarchal culture gain by terminating Black girlhood? Before Black girlhood can be actualized as Black womanhood. I'm really thinking about that. Because it seems to be happening in a pervasive way that consciously or subconsciously there has to be a reward for this. You know? Yeah.
So as we come to the end of our talk in the Black Writers Studio, I want to know what is the final takeaway? Is there a final takeaway that you want folks to have when reading this new piece, this new book? Is there, you know, you opened up talking about outcomes when we were talking about dogma, and that you're not so much concerned, right? You only concerned about outcomes. So what are the outcomes?
You are a hard interviewer. I don't know what the outcomes are for the reader. I know my outcome was, when I thought about writing about Black girls that have been victim to the pervasive gaze of patriarchal culture, I did not want to reinscribe that back onto Black girlhood. So I really worked with my publisher to try to prevent that. And I really worked on craft to prevent that. That is one of the reasons that all of these poems are in second person, so that the reader becomes the subject of the poem rather than another window for you to look in on Black girls.
Wow.
Number two, what I attempted to do.
So no peeping Toms on your watch, right?
Right, because some of these girls in the book are victim to that, right?
Right.
Number two, the first page of this book was supposed to be a mirrored page. My publisher and I agreed on that. We brought copious stacks of mirrored paper, but as they were binding the book, because the paper had foil on it, it was conducting heat faster than the other pages. And so it was consistently burning and singeing. So we could not get it into the book. I was devastated.
Wait a minute. Well, wait to get my hands on. Is that it's really going to be something that folks who are not Black women are going to be reading to get some insight, to be able to have something to say or to comment. But what you're saying is that it ain't that easy. When you read this, you're going to be deconstructing a lot of the things that you come to the table believing about Black women, which just is not so.
That's it. And you're going to have to deal with the reflective parts of your own humanity.
Yeah.
This is not me holding your hand through the journey of Black girlhood.
That's right.
This is you figuring out what Black girlhood humanity encompasses and realizing that it may have more plumes than your own humanity.
Wow. I like the fact that you bring up the fact that we're not just in the midst of a global health pandemic, but this racial pandemic that has been waging for centuries, right? Mm-hmm. So I want to thank you so much for coming,
Khadijah,
to the Black Writers Studio, sharing your brilliance with us.
All at the Hurston Wright, all at
Golden. Yes. And let's end again. Let's end as we started, with you telling us where the book will be available for people to pick up.
A Breath Better Spent, Living Black Girlhood, Bloomsbury.com. Also available at your local bookstore, hopefully. That's and if it's not, they'll get it for you.
Can they get it on your website?
On my website, you can go to my website, DaMarisHill.com.
Yes.
On my socials, usually all DaMaris Hill _bound woman, Instagram, TikTok, DaMaris Hill. I'm on the tick and the talks.
That's right.
Yeah.
And for the folks watching you, can you just do a little shake? Because you're just looking so glamorous and fabulous for us. That's right.
Let's go here.
Oh, I love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Dr. Hill, Dr. DaMaris Hill, your loveliness, your brilliance. I can't wait to get my hands on that book. I didn't get a chance to get it. I didn't get a chance to ask all the questions, but that just means that I have to ask you back for a future episode. But thank you.